Founding director of the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics, CNN chief political analyst, and host of Hacks on Tap podcast, David Axelrod. Welcome to the show. How are you?
So good to be here. I'm pretty good.
Yeah?
Pretty good, yeah.
Like you could be better,
all
or is
things
that just
considered.
all?
There are things that are up in the air as we speak today, including the Cubs and the Brewers.
Is that ahead of Russia and Ukraine for you, or is it about the same?
It's very close. The great thing about sports, Jesse, is that you can be incredibly intense about it and no one dies. So,
Yes.
So I'd have to put Ukraine above that. But
That's generous.
Yeah, but I'm headed to the ballpark later today, so.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. And I probably should have known this many moons ago, but as I was reading about you historically, not because I feel like I know
You must have had a
current
lot
you.
of time, man. I'm old.
No, yeah, you're not that old, but you're old enough that you went to Stuyvesant.
High School.
Yes, and I grew up in Tribeca and still live in Tribeca, and I remember probably the most intimidating day of my life was taking the Stuyvesant test, which I did not do well enough on to go to Stuyvesant, but waiting in that corridor.
That's a travesty.
It's okay. I think they feel good about who's gone through there, and I ended up fine. It just cost my parents a lot more money
I'll tell you, a few years
me
ago,
to get
I went
educated.
and I made the graduation speech at Stuyvesant High School like half a century after I graduated or something. And the valedictorian spoke before me and said, the firefighters are New York's bravest and the police are New York's finest. And they said, but here at Stuyvesant, we're New York's smartest.
Ooh.
And so I quickly rewrote my remarks while I was sitting there to turn it into a homily about the value of humility.
Oh.
So
did the valedictorian understand that you were cooking him?
No,
or her?
I don't think so. That's part of having humility, is understanding that you're being talked about. But anyway, so
I like it. I would love to see that, and that kind of doesn't surprise me, just running into those kids on the street. But some of them definitely are New York's smartest.
Yeah,
so.
I loved it. It was a little bit different place. There was a more diverse student body, and that was in the late 60s. So we spent as much time on the streets as we did in class. And it was an interesting time. I got a lot out of it, actually. You know who my English teacher was? Frank McCourt.
Really?
Yes. He was a substitute English teacher, and my English teacher took ill, and he took over the class. And so there was an interesting place to be.
Well, the only thing I've got that's pertinent to the news cycle is Jeffrey Epstein taught at the school that I went to. So I would much rather have Frank McCourt.
Boy, I can only imagine the stories that people had to tell there.
Yeah, I got nothing, though, which makes me feel a lot safer than others. But what a wild tale that is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My God.
Anyway, I did not mean to go Epstein so early. It's not even in the script.
Play the Epstein card. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And now I'm going to do redistricting. So let's get into today's episode. We're going to be talking about Newsom entering the redistricting fight, where Ukraine and Russia peace talks stand, and Obama world's response to Mamdani. All right, let's dive in. California Governor Gavin Newsom throwing himself right into the middle of the fight that could reshape both his image and his party's future. He launched a push to redraw California's congressional lines, a very aggressive counter to Republican-led redistricting in Texas, which is driven by Donald Trump. If he succeeds, Democrats could gain up to 5 new House seats and shore up 4 swing seats, possibly flipping the control of Congress. But it's a big gamble. The ballot measure could fail. He's actually asking the people, which I think is a very good thing.
I think he has to by law, but yes.
Oh, really? Well, yeah. He's made it out like he doesn't have to and that he's just a good guy. So, all right. Well played, Gavin. You tricked me. But the Terminator himself, former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is kind of the father of the independent redistricting commission, I guess, council commission, is opposing it. Supporters like Nancy Pelosi call this bold leadership the Democrats need. But now layered on top of this, Trump says he wants to ban mail-in ballots altogether, even floating an executive order to, quote, help bring honesty, which is his strong suit, to the 2026 midterms, despite his own party benefiting from mail voting in recent cycles. David, how are you feeling about the redistricting fight? The news from this morning, we're recording on Monday, is that the Texas House members, the Democrats, have returned home. So the few weeks that we had them on the lam is coming to an end. And I imagine that Governor Abbott is going to be able to do whatever Governor Abbott wants to do.
Which may have been inevitable. They certainly drew attention to the issue. Look, this is a theme that's going to course throughout our conversation because it goes into the other topic as well. It's really important to understand Donald Trump's philosophy. It's not conservative or liberal, or it's simply this, that the world is a kind of corrupt dystopia, kind of the Hunger Games, and the strong take what they want, however they can get it, and the weak fall away, and rules and laws and norms are for suckers. I mean, that's what he truly believes. I think that's one of the things that draws him to a guy like Putin who shares that worldview. And it extends to this. Look, I live in a state, Illinois, that has a pretty gerrymandered map, 14-3, 82, 83%. This was been pointed out by Republicans. But we live in a country where each state makes its own rules, and it's hard to sacrifice the advantage when the other side is not. And this is a constant problem for Democrats because they believe in rules and laws and norms and institutions. And when you're in a political battle with Donald Trump, it's asymmetric warfare because he does not. And so, he called the governor of Texas, who by all accounts reluctantly agreed to reintroduce redistricting in the middle of a 10-year period, which is highly, highly unusual, in order to try and get 5 seats. You can imagine the conversation, that it sounded a little bit like what happened in Georgia, just find me 5 seats. And Abbott dutifully did. So then Democrats are faced with, well, what do you do about that? If the rules are being changed in the middle of the game, do you stand on principle, and do you stand on those? Because what we're facing right now is completely unchecked power. The Congress has not only delegated to Trump much of their prerogative under law, but also they have completely abdicated their responsibility to act as a check, to act as an oversight on the executive branch and on the president. And imagine if he wins the midterm elections, which he would not under current course and speed, I don't believe. Imagine if he does, how unbridled and how emboldened he would be, knowing that, there is no check. There are no inspectors general. The Congress is sidelined. The courts are twisted up. He's making it harder for media organizations. So there's a lot at stake here. And I say this as someone who believes that, gerrymandering has been part of the problem for us. But you can't partially reform. You can't partially reform, especially in this environment. And so, people say, oh, Newsom's just trying to score some points for 2028. He might be, but sometimes the politics and the merit of the mission marry up. And I think in this case, he's doing what's appropriate.
Yeah, it feels that way to me as well. And I like the fact that these new maps only exist until 2030. And then the Independent Commission comes back into play. And he gave a news conference on Friday, and he had all the members of the Independent Commission there speaking in favor of this, which I thought sent a really important signal that these are extraordinary times and we really believe in this.
Though the cynic, and I'm sure there are plenty who said it's a weird kind of independent commission if they show up to affirm the governor, But I listen, I think that's right. The problem is political problem. The challenge is, it's always hard to explain in politics. And so this is a kind of convoluted workaround. And it remains to be seen whether they'll accomplish it. I mean, voters have to approve this. They'll have to approve this in November. It's, I think, in the polling that I've seen, it's ahead, but
Yeah.
it's not a slam dunk. And you got to believe that there's going to be a ton of money spent to try and defeat it.
It's supposed to be a couple $100 million that'll probably come on both sides. And I heard there might be one Republican donor in particular who would spend up to $100 million.
Well, you better believe the president's going to make sure that the no side has as much money as it needs, and maybe his buddies in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I would love another cycle where I have to listen to what Peter Thiel wants again. But it is curious. So redistricting aside, or kind of the mechanics of it, this is obviously changing the way that the country, and at least the Democratic Party, is viewing Gavin Newsom. So his approval rating is ticking up, mostly with women. I think he's still minus 25 with men, which might be a jealousy thing because he's so good looking.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know if that's
I'd
appropriate.
kill for his hair,
I mean, same. And like my hair's fine and I'm a woman, but everything is working for Gavin Newsom and, picture perfect family. There are a lot of reasons if you're just looking at the aesthetics of everything. I have concerns about having a nominee that ran California because you can poke a lot of holes in that with homelessness and drugs and whatever else. But I was really struck by his launch video, or I guess the first video that his team put out about redistricting, because he had this line where he said, "We are here to meet this moment head on. We will not be complicit." And that's literally what every Democrat I have spoken to since Trump was inaugurated has said that they want to hear. That they overwhelmingly don't want Democrats to play nice. They don't want to hear about bipartisanship. If you're going to do a bill together, don't tell me almost. I just want to know that you understand the gravity of the time that we're in and you're meeting this moral moment. And Scott, who is on a nice month-long vacation, so thank you again for joining me, always says that he thinks somebody has
only
to...
because he didn't invite me.
Yeah, he definitely didn't invite me. He doesn't respond to my text messages, famously. Sometimes I get a thumbs up. So I'm sure he will respond to you. If you text and say, "I had a great time with Jesse," then he'll probably have an answer.
I will definitely do that.
Please do that. That would make me feel better. But, Scott wants someone to start running. And I understand why a Governor Shapiro, Wes Moore, Gretchen Whitmer, whoever is going to be in, might be waiting a little bit because it's still 3 years away and you need to kind of assess the scene. But Newsom he hasn't said, "I am running for president," but I don't think anyone looks at him and thinks this isn't someone that's trying to...
I don't think you need a lot to deduce that. You don't need the Goodyear blimp with a banner stranding behind it.
I don't need my political science degree to tell you that Gavin Newsom wants to be president.
He's out after this term, and, he has an advantage over not just those two, but J.B. Pritzker, who's been a little more forward-leaning, who clearly is running because he'll be free and clear to travel the country after 2026. And if he passes this bill, if that helps offset whatever chicanery Trump has planned for 2026, and it's not just going to be this, that'll be helpful. But I would just caution, having gone through a lot of presidential races, that we're at like mile marker 2 of a marathon. And right now, Gavin Newsom is having a spurt. But there are a lot of tests in a race for president. So, I wouldn't deduce from this that he will be the nominee of the party, but this this is a great opportunity. And look, he is a great political athlete. He is quick. He is a great performer. He's smart. So he has a lot of assets. But as you point out, there are vulnerabilities as well over the course of a long political career. I don't think the party's going to punish him for having once been married to Kimberly Guilfoyle, but there are other things that that will come up. And so I did have him on my own podcast when I was doing the Axe Files podcast, and I did say, like, "What were you thinking?" And he said, "Well, she was a lot different then," which I accept. But in this moment, he is going to get a lot of, because Democrats are frustrated. There isn't really that much. I hear this all the time. When are we going to fight? When are we going? And then you say to people, "Well, what does that look like?" And it's like, "Oh, I don't know," because the fact is, when you have all the levers of power under your control, there's not that much. You can use dilatory tactics and so on, but there's not that much to do. So Newsom now has something to actually do here, and I think that is advantageous for him. It's one way to strike back that is actually tangible and real.
Yeah, it's definitely had the desired effect in terms of social media, which has been something, I know it might sound trivial, but Democrats have been really bummed out that our representatives are so bad on social. And some of the videos are very earnest and charming, I guess, but
Yeah.
haven't really broken through. And now he has like billions of impressions, and Trump isn't
it may
using
be
all
because
caps.
some of our leaders came to politics well before the social media age. So
That might have something to do with it.
Or even the television age. I don't know. But
well, some of them, but I don't want to name names, but everyone knows that we've got an age problem.
Yes.
Definitely. Do you think that Trump going after mail-in ballots is going to do you think that's going to work out for him? Because there are a lot of Republican states that are very
the
pro
irony of
using
the whole mail-in ballot thing was that it traditionally favored Republicans. And so I don't think there, and honestly, early voting mail-in ballots. The thing about the Trump campaign in 2024, aside from the spectacle of Trump himself, and we can talk about that, but it was very well run and very smart. And they knew from the beginning that they were going to have to compete on the battlefield of early voting and mail-in ballots. So they cut Democratic advantage there. I don't know. I haven't really thought deeply. I think it's meant to wound Democrats and hurt Democrats because Democrats tend to vote early and tend to use these ballots. But, there's a whole different dynamic in a midterm election. The biggest problem for Trump is that there are a lot of voters who are Trump voters who really aren't regular voters and aren't regular Republican voters. And the challenge that they haven't yet solved through several cycles is how do they overcome that? And that's, as a Democratic Party, and I think this has some issues with it, but as the Democratic Party has become more the party of college-educated, sort of metropolitan voters who are habitual voters, that's a big advantage in lower turnout elections. And so the big challenge for Trump and the Republicans in the midterms is going to be, how do we get a big turnout and how do we get our voters out who are not habitual voters, who are skeptical and cynical about the system. And the added problem for them, Jesse, is that a lot of those voters were motivated by the economy, and that ain't so good.
Right.
For all of Trump's bluster, I used to hear Biden brag about Bidenomics during the campaign, and I said then, you can't jawbone people into feeling what they're not experiencing. You can't tell people up is down and down is up. Trump is trying because he thinks he could sell anything to anybody, but whether he can succeed over time, now if the economy actually does improve, and the signs right now aren't real encouraging because of some of the things he's doing, if the economy were to improve, that would improve his chances. So all these little things may have some impact. And they're certainly designed to change the game. But the larger forces at play may be too much for him to overcome.
Yeah. And historically speaking, Democrats should have a good midterms. Yeah. So.
Absolutely. Look, the last time an incumbent party won seats in the midterm election was in 2002 after the 9/11 invasion, and George W. Bush picked up, I think, 6 seats in the House, and I think Clinton picked up some seats in 98, and some of it was a backlash to the Republicans going after him on the Lewinsky stuff, and some of it reflected the fact that there was a rip-roaring economy at the time. So, yeah, I think he's, there's a reason, Jesse, why he
asking
is
for seats,
doing what he's doing. Yes, he's like, he knows that he is climbing uphill on this, and I think he's deathly worried about having he's lived this once with a House of Congress that was actually fulfilling its obligations, and he and it wasn't good for him, and he doesn't want to go through it again.
So I've spent a lot of time, like, socially, which makes me sound like a loser, but professionally and in my regular life, thinking about a lot of the themes that you just mentioned and the numbers, right? That Donald Trump is underwater general approval when it comes to the economy, immigration, which were his big, two issues, foreign policy. And we're going to talk about Russia and Ukraine in a little bit. Um, and Democrats, it's getting better, the generic ballot. It was, a 1-2 point advantage. And now some polls have it, 6, 7, 8 points, which would be more typical. But I just always have this anxiety that Trump has defied history so many times and that he's also working to consolidate power at such an incredible pace that we just don't really know what we're in for. That you go to sleep and you wake up and DC is militarized, right? And the same thing happened in Los Angeles.
We've gone from zero to Hungary very fast. Look, Donald Trump is not to be underestimated. He is, and I think the great advantage he has, in addition to, that, he is maybe one of the greatest salesmen in the history of the world, and can sell anything, is that he has all this power now, and he's consolidating it, and he's neutralizing sources of opposition. But perhaps his greatest advantage is the Democratic brand is degraded, and that's something. I mean, I think that I would urge Democrats. Yes, you have to challenge Trump on all of these trespasses on democracy. You have to challenge him on all of the broken promises around the economy, which is really the principal reason he got elected. There's plenty to challenge him about, but you also have to address the things that caused you to be still to this day a degraded brand.
You don't think that they have yet, or that we're not doing a great job?
No, I don't. I think that the fundamental problem, and I started hinting at this before, was that the Democratic Party has increasingly become a party of metropolitan, college-educated voters, and it still fashions itself and still believes itself to be the party of working people, and certainly as opposed to the sort of kleptocracy that we see right now, it compares well on that front. But the truth is, there is this attitudinal thing where Democrats approach working people, particularly the white working class, but working people generally, because we saw an erosion among Hispanics and younger black men too, approaches them as sort of as missionaries and as anthropologists. And they show up and they say, we're here to help you become more like us. We know what you need, and we're going to fight for what you need. And it's laden with a kind of maybe unintended disrespect, but that's how it's felt, because those folks deserve respect. When we had a pandemic,
I do.
You'll remember, you and I and a lot of people were fortunate enough to sit in front of our computers like this and make a living safely at home. And then there were a lot of people out there who actually had to go out and work and risk themselves, and to grow things and make things and ship things to protect us and to care for us. And we cheered them. We cheered them as essential workers.
Yeah.
Remember, we called them essential workers. You may have been on your balcony banging pots. I don't know.
Oh, all the pots. I don't cook, so finally they got some
You borrowed
use.
pots
But
and banged them?
I did it literally from next door neighbor who I ended up marrying, which was a nice COVID surprise.
Yes.
But yeah, we thought that we were heroes for that. And I remember the Atlantic piece, I think it was in the Atlantic, about this, about us calling them essential workers. And it was this pushback that basically just said, F you. Right. Like, we don't want to have to be doing this. We would love to be able to be sitting inside now.
Beyond that, the pandemic goes away and they sort of become invisible again. And so, I think that that's a real issue, and the Democratic Party has to do as much listening as talking, and approach people with respect for not just for what they do, but for what they think. And that's a problem. And there are all kinds of ancillary issues associated with that. The second thing is, I think that there's a general sense among a large number of Americans that the system has failed them, that the system is rigged, that they're working harder and harder, and it's to keep their heads above water, that their kids' prospects are less good than theirs were when they were kids. All of that. And that the system is corrupt in many ways. And honestly, it's more corrupt today than at any time in my lifetime. And the Democratic Party is not exempt in that indictment. And Democrats have to take a good hard look at that and talk about the future. You know, Donald Trump's doing a teardown. And the question is, what are you going to build after that teardown? And are you simply going to restore what was there? Because you hear a lot of that. We're going to just fix all of. That's not what people want. They're not interested in rebuilding what was the status quo. They want something better. They want something new. They want something that will actually respond on a daily basis to their concerns and not the concerns of big-moneyed lobbyists and campaign contributors. So the Democratic Party has to, if it wants to succeed, become the party of renewal, not just restoration. And so, and you can't be the party of the status quo. And they've been maneuvered into being the party of a failed status quo. So I think there's a lot of thinking to be done, and a lot of work to be done to put the party in a position come 2028 to be successful. And honestly, the quicker that happens, I think the candidates who are going to do well in 2026 are the candidates who recognize what I'm saying and who have something a little bolder, a little more authentic, a little bit more connected to people's lives
Yeah,
to
I think, I
say.
mean, I don't want to make everything about the generational issue, but I've been, doing this for about a year now and spoken to some incredible representatives. And I do notice that on the younger end of the spectrum, there are really innovative, exciting ideas that people have, like Jake Auchincloss, Ruben Gallego, Pat Ryan, Mallory McMorrow I had on, who's super
Marie
exciting.
Blusenkamp-Perez, you should
Yeah.
talk to her.
Oh, I should. The banana
She's
thing
really interesting.
was very interesting. I like how it doesn't matter how small it might seem to people. She's like, I am all about improving the lives of the people that I represent in this space. And, last time I checked, that's what you got hired to do.
And that's why she's gotten elected and reelected in a district that Trump has carried 3 times.
Yeah, I can't stand, I get it that everyone thinks their brand of politics is better, but when folks tear down the people who have won these tough elections, like I was listening to your Hacks on Tap episode a few weeks ago when you had on Alyssa Slotkin, and you can have disagreements with her about certain policy, you want to talk about Israel, et cetera. Like, she won a seat that the people criticizing her couldn't have won. So would you rather have a senator from Michigan, or would you rather just complain?
And, as much as anything, Alyssa is very, very much in touch with her constituents. Yeah. She knows what farmers and working people in that state are feeling and going through. She's commonsensical. She is willing to challenge both parties when necessary. And that's why she's successful, and that's what it's going to take to be successful, because, as I said, the status quo is unacceptable to large numbers of people who...
Contrast to his rocky solo meeting with Donald Trump earlier this year. The visit followed Trump's high-profile sit-down with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, which failed to deliver a ceasefire but allegedly sparked talk of a broader peace deal. Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, called the summit a breakthrough, though I didn't actually see much evidence for that. He said Putin agreed to U.S.-backed security guarantees for Ukraine, though the Russians are not confirming that. Allegedly, he eased his demands on land swaps, also not seeing confirmation of that. And Trump has shifted his own position, dropping the push for a ceasefire and instead aiming for a full peace agreement. The move clashes with Zelensky, who still insists fighting must stop before negotiations. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio is cautioning that the U.S. is nowhere near a deal. So basically, we have no idea what's going on. I want to reiterate for our listeners, we're recording this on Monday. They are going to be sitting down in a couple hours from now. But, 36,000 foot view. David, what did you make of Friday's summit in Alaska, and how are you feeling about the prospects of a deal that doesn't include remaking the USSR?
Well, look, Friday itself was kind of a nothing burger, at least from the outside, because Trump went in with fire and brimstone about how he was going to demand a ceasefire. And if he didn't get a ceasefire, he was going to take punitive action in the form of sanctions that he's been threatening for months and that Congress has been poised to impose, but haven't because he didn't want them. And then, he went in like a lion and came out like a kitten, which has been the story of his relationship with Putin. And, I go back to what I said before. You hear a lot of people say, well, what does Putin have on Trump and all of that? I have no evidence of that. But I'll tell you this. I do think that they share this worldview. I think Trump admires Putin. Remember what Trump said when Putin invaded Ukraine? He said, it's kind of genius. Kind of genius. Like, if you can snatch a country, why wouldn't you? Because that's the way he views the world. So now what he's doing, he's looking at Putin is telling him, look, we've got the advantage. We're just going to keep plowing away. I'm willing to go the distance on this until they submit. This is the best you're going to get right now. I want this territory, the additional territory in the Donbass, which happens to be the most strategic territory that is being contested. He doesn't have it right now. And I'll stop the war, and I'll give you a letter saying I'm not going to invade again. Well, you know what? If you're
A
a
strongly worded
Ukrainian,
letter?
this guy has twice violated past pledges not to invade. So why would they accept his word now? Vladimir Putin's word is worthless. So then comes the issue of security guarantees. And, Trump apparently said, well, the United States might participate in that. What does that look like? But I'll tell you this, I always try and look at it from the standpoint of the politics of everyone involved. I think Zelensky is going to have a very hard time selling that kind of land concession, or any land concession, but certainly that land concession to the Russians, or in any way certifying that that is Russian land. So we'll see. But you could see overnight, because in the modern era, at least in the world of Donald Trump, we do the most sensitive diplomacy on Truth Social. And overnight he said, well, it's up to Zelensky. He could end the war right now. Well, yeah, if you surrender, I think someone should tell Trump, though, that Neville Chamberlain did not win a Nobel Peace Prize, that capitulation is not the same as making peace because it doesn't endure. I thought that Rubio was right when I saw him on TV yesterday. He said that it has to be verifiable, it has to be enforceable, and it has to be enduring, whatever agreement they make. Otherwise, you're going to be right back here again. And with Putin, I know Trump believes, oh, Putin would never do that to me. First of all, whether he likes it or not, Trump won't be with us forever. But maybe he thinks he can outlive Putin. But I'm not sure anybody who comes after Putin will be all that much better. But, none of this is reassuring. So the Europeans are coming as sort of co-guarantors, and hopefully they'll provide some stability to the conversation. It won't devolve into what we saw in February. But to me, it looks like I set it up. I heard Trump doing his exit interview with Sean Hannity on your network there. I heard, and I made note of the fact that he said, well, it's really up to Zelensky now. And the fear out of this summit was that that Putin would dictate the terms, and then Trump would then try and force Zelensky to accept them. And everybody was relieved when when the post-press conference seemed to indicate, no, there really wasn't a deal and so on. But I think the fears we had going into that meeting with Putin and Trump may be realized today, that Trump will now try and jam Zelensky, which is why I think the Europeans wanted to come along on this. Last thing on this, and I'm sorry you put in a quarter and got 10
No,
plays
I love
here,
it.
but as an American, I understand that you have to deal with foreign leaders on the terms you have to deal with them on when you're trying to negotiate something. But let us be clear, Vladimir Putin is a tyrant and a thug and a murderer who, even as all of this is going on, continues. He just bombed an apartment building last night. Okay? He is a murderer. And for him to land and get full honors from a president of the United States with a military flyover and a red carpet, and then, lavish praise on the back end, was disgusting to me. And he didn't have, Trump didn't have to do that. I think Putin plays Trump like a Stradivarius. When Barack Obama met Putin in 2009, Putin was the prime minister, Medvedev was the president, Putin was the prime minister, but Obama met with both. And in that meeting, he said to Obama, kind of darkly, you're an educated man. I'm just an old security apparatchik. But he is an old security apparatchik, and he's brilliant at it. And Trump's the easiest mark on the planet. Every leader in the world now knows that all you need to do is flatter Trump and embrace whatever themes he wants embraced, and he will treat you well. What did he say when he heard Hillary Clinton on your podcast last
I'm
week
going to
say
have to
she would
start
nominate him
liking
for
her
the
again.
I'm going to have to start liking her again. That is the
That's
that
it.
is
He's so simple.
Lindsey Graham. I said at one point years ago that people need to understand Trump's very simple. If you're nice to him, he'll be nice to you. So Putin has this all gamed out. She, I think, on some level, has some of that gamed out. All the Europeans understand now. Zelensky was a late adopter to this for reasons I understand, but now everybody comes with a bouquet. And Trump in turn. But I think he admires Vladimir Putin. I think he thinks Putin is tough and smart and made himself unbelievably rich while serving as president, and conducts himself by the rules of the world, the way the world really is, which is you take what you want however you can get it.
Yeah, that's been, I guess, one of the more depressing lessons that I've been learning over the past few years. I've always been a kind of eternal optimist, glass half full type person, didn't want to take the Hobbesian view of everything, that it's just nasty, brutish, and short. And I don't know if it's just the Trump years that have pulled me over to that side, but I very much feel that way. And when I see these world leaders come together, and I agree with you that the Europeans want to be there as some sort of protection for Zelensky, and it takes a lot to get Macron to leave a vacation, right? A stylish Frenchman who wants to be by the beach. But,
hopefully they'll get lunch at least. I think.
Well, that lunch looked pretty good. That was left in the printer. You saw that.
Yes. Maybe they flew it back to Washington.
Whatever was left behind. But I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. And you said I have no evidence of what Putin.
You can go far in this business that way.
I do know that. Yes, I'm trying to keep some semblance of normalcy, though, to be true to my brand. But I do think that something meaningful, not like Putin pulled out some pictures of Trump or something, but when they were in the beast by themselves, I think that those moments mattered a lot, whatever they were.
I don't think Trump, like I said, I don't have any evidence of
No, none of us do. But isn't it more fun when you don't?
Well, I mean, but what I was going to say is if Putin had the most compromising material on Trump, would he behave that much differently than he is right now?
No. And he's gotten, it's not quite Helsinki level where Trump stood next to him and said he didn't meddle in the election. Right. But one of the pieces of reporting that the Times put out that I think was the most disturbing to me was that Trump and Putin really bonded over how much they hate Joe Biden. And that Putin told him,
Well, that's part of Putin's genius, right?
100%, but it also plays into all of
Trump's
these
funny bone.
sideshows that we have going on right now, that they're trying to relitigate the 2016 election, and that Tulsi Gabbard wants us to believe the idea that Putin wanted Hillary Clinton to win versus Donald Trump. And maybe it's just that I work in conservative media, so I can foreshadow what the next few days of my life is going to look like. But I don't want those days of my life to look that way. You want to be having a substantive conversation about, what could have happened, and, what Zelensky reasonably could give up without completely selling out his country. And I'm always struck by the fact that, how you have the list of demands, right? What Russia wants and what Ukraine wants. And the Russian demands never change. Literally, Vladimir Putin in 4 years has not even, put comma something new. It's exactly the same, including the denazification of Ukraine. And watching Trump backpedal overnight on Truth Social, and even seeing how much someone like Marco Rubio, who does have moments where he looks like his old self, right,
Yes.
hedging on the Sunday shows. And Steve Witkoff just
Yes.
seemed totally out of his depth, frankly. But watching Rubio, I feel like he's the one with the most tells of the administration. Like Mike Waltz was as well, but Mike Waltz is no longer in that kind of position. And that's really concerning to me. And
Well, I actually ascribe to Rubio being both National Security Advisor and Secretary of State, the fact that Trump showed some public irritation with Putin. I thought, well, maybe Marco's whispering in his ear about some of this, but at the end of the day, we'll see what happens here. But it doesn't feel good.
and it
Do you
doesn't
ever see
feel
the?
different. I'm curious, though, you mentioned Obama.
Wait, let me
Oh,
ask
sorry.
you. I wanted to ask you one
Okay.
question. You ever see the Manchurian
Yeah,
Candidate?
of course.
The best episode. The first version, the 62
Yes.
version, much
My
better
parents
than the
made
second.
sure that I had that kind of
Yes,
education.
yes. Yeah. So anyway, enough said. Go ahead.
No, it's a valid point, but it also, I don't know, I'm scared to get over my skis, because you talk to intelligent people who watch what goes on, and they say, well, can anything be true except the absolute worst case scenario in all of this? And then the right pushes back and they say, you're insane and you're stuck somewhere in the middle. But I want to make sure, because you mentioned when Obama met with Medvedev and Putin, and the Obama administration, the Biden administration, and the Trump administration have all tried to have some kind of reset with Russia, and it was literally called that in the Obama administration. Are there any lessons? And I should note as well that Trump is the only one who's tried to do it twice. Right. The other ones did not try to, once they saw him for who he was or who he has always been, they backed off. But are there any lessons from what went on during the Obama years that you think are important to understand for the moment that we're in now?
Well, I'll tell you what, when Obama met with Putin, the first 57 minutes of what was supposed to be a 1 hour meeting, which turned into a 2 hour meeting, which worked out to my benefit, by the way, because then I got to sit with Gorbachev for 45 minutes while he was waiting for Obama. So that
You
was
guys
an
were in the waiting
incredible
room?
treat. Gorbachev showed up for the meeting, and Obama was still off meeting with Putin. But anyway, but the reason he was late was because the first 57 minutes, I think, were a diatribe from Putin on all the indignities the West had heaped on Russia. So, that was, I think, a foreshadowing. And I don't think Medvedev, who's now turned into like a troll for Putin on social media, was actually a much more reasonable figure back then, and they did get some stuff done that was valuable. But it's obvious that Putin was the power behind the throne there, and when he resumed his presidency. Things really backslid. And, I think that as you point out, not just in this negotiation, but for the last 20 years, Putin's fundamental motivations have been the same, which is he wants to try and reconstruct the Soviet empire. He wants to restore Russia to a position of leadership in the world. He wants spheres of influence, which is something that Trump also believes, that you just sit down, the strong sit down and carve up the world. I don't think Biden didn't understand that lesson. I think if there's a critique, and you people will say, well, the Republicans like to say Obama didn't do anything when they took Crimea. He did. I mean, they imposed very tough sanctions. They kicked them out of the G7, which I think did wound Putin, who has basically lived in a kind of exile on the world stage since that time, only to be ushered back in by Donald Trump in Alaska last week. If you look back, you'd say at a moment when Russia was on its back legs and in deep trouble in this war, perhaps we should have provided more in terms of weapons. I mean, I think that's a very respectable argument. But the big thing is Putin is Putin. Putin has, grand expansionist dreams and is willing, as we can see, to sacrifice millions of his people to that goal. And we need to approach him in that way. And so when you say to the Ukrainians, well, he's going to give you a letter. So good news. If that's really the case, I'd be deeply, deeply worried about him.
Yeah. Hillary also said, besides the Nobel Peace Prize line, that character just doesn't change that much. And there's no one that's more true of than Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump.
Putin is as consistent as can be. And by the way, on this issue of what he was up to in 2016, it was not even a secret. It was very open how much he hated Hillary Clinton because he thought as Secretary of State that she had meddled in his internal affairs, in his politics, and so he was out to punish her. I expect that he had started out with no expectation that he could actually shift the outcome of that election. He just won the lottery,
Just get lucky sometimes in those medal.
Well, first of all, let me say, Patrick invited me to come over and meet Mamdani, and I was interested in doing it because
he's kind of amazing.
He won an impressive victory in New York, and he seemed like an interesting person, and I wanted to see what was going on there. And I went over, and he indeed is interesting, and I think more thoughtful than his detractors would suggest. But I didn't know that Obama had called him, and he didn't mention it. And I didn't know that John and Dan were in touch with him either. But we all probably gravitated to the same place, which is this guy ran a very positive campaign and captured the imagination of a lot of New Yorkers, and especially younger New Yorkers who have come to believe that through their own lived experience that New York is unaffordable and that, the city could become this, is rapidly becoming a city of the super rich and the very poor, and middle-class people are scuffling with ridiculous prices and costs and so on. That was a winning message.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a message that while New York is a special case, nationally, I think people are experiencing that. So I think that's a lesson that people can learn. I told Mamdani, I don't agree with every proposal that he has, but I know he's asking the right question, which is how do we make this a livable and affordable city for all New Yorkers and not just for the wealthiest New Yorkers. And he won, and he's the candidate of the Democratic Party. He won in part because young people voted in larger numbers than the early vote, for example. I think 25% of those early voters were voters who hadn't voted in mayoral elections before, and they were mostly young. That's good for the Democratic Party. You want to bring people back in, and I think it's I don't think that I living in Chicago or, people living around the country, I don't think they should substitute their judgment about what they would want in their cities for uh, what New Yorkers think is right for their city. And so, I think we don't go around screening mayoral candidates all over the country for ideological purity on every issue. I know that the Middle East, look, I'm the son of a Jewish refugee. Okay. So, Israel is important to me, and there are 15 million Jews in the world. Israel came into being after the Holocaust, 6 million Jews killed. And I know what it meant to my grandparents. I know what it means to subsequent generations, that is a safe place, a refuge for Jews, and at a time when anti-Semitism is welling up. That doesn't mean, though, that one has to embrace the policies of Benjamin Netanyahu. And you can love Israel and hate some of the policies of Netanyahu. I associate myself with that. And there are some issues on which I, you know, I, I disagree with Mamdani relative to the Middle East, but he's not running for Secretary of State. He's not going to make foreign policy. If he can make New York more affordable and livable for all its citizens, more power to him.
Yeah, and that would be nice as one of those younger-ish people. I mean, elder millennial, so I'm not young, but, a New
Well,
Yorker.
everything's relative. You're young to me.
That's true. I was not at Stuyvesant in the late 60s. But I've had to, Mamdani was not my choice. Actually, I had no choice in the field that I was actually interested in, and was very disappointed that there wasn't a more.
Did you vote?
I did vote. Um, eh.
Where did you rank Mamdani? Are you willing to say?
I actually didn't rank him. I just voted for Cuomo. And yeah, I think that was of Cuomo voters, I think that was the most common ranking or way of doing your ballot. I haven't said that out loud, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of flack for it. But I mean, it's been pretty clear that I voted for Cuomo because I did think the New York Times editorial board, where they came down on this, where they basically said, I don't like him, but I think that of the field, he's going to be able to do the best job. And I took, Bradlander had a lot of very good policy.
I would have had to undo their persuasive editorials about why he should leave the governorship.
It was a miserable situation for people. And then I started to pay more attention to Mamdani and why people were gravitating towards him. And I'm at peace at this moment. I am, not thrilled necessarily about some of the issues surrounding Israel. And I'm very critical of Netanyahu. I think he's a criminal. I don't think he should be in this job anymore. I wish he had been out years ago.
There are a lot of Israelis who would agree.
Yeah, majority of Israelis would agree with me. But, Mamdani has not been perfect in addressing people's concerns. And there are a lot of Jews that still have them. But he also got, 46% of the Jewish vote. And Bradlander, made that happen in a lot of ways. I don't know if he would have been as supportive if there had been an alternative to Cuomo, like if Dan Goldman had run or a Richie Torres or somebody else. But we are where we are at this point. And I think that this look of not supporting the Democratic nominee who won so overwhelmingly is just sending a signal, like we were talking about in the first part of our conversation, to Democratic voters that we're status quo folks.
In New York,
we like it the way it's always been. And
well, listen, I mean, consider what's being said, that you should set aside the nominee of the Democratic Party and vote for a governor who had to resign in disgrace and make him the mayor of New York, someone who frankly hadn't expressed an interest in becoming mayor of New York.
Actually, a negative opinion of New York.
So, and who Donald Trump apparently has now at least covertly embraced. I mean, they've had discussions and so on. I mean, I think it's one of the things that makes people cynical about politics is I don't like this person, but I fear the other person more. And, you know, honestly, that is one of the things that's turned a lot of young people away from the Democratic Party. Like, how about voting on the basis of hope and on aspirations and so on? Mamdani is going to have to prove himself. I think he's going to be the mayor of New
I do
York,
too.
and we'll see, how he governs and who he brings with him to govern. I'm Patrick Gaspard's, who was our ambassador to South Africa, was in the Obama administration as a political director in the White House, who has a long history in New York. Patrick's a good guy, a very experienced guy, and there are other people around him who say to me, like, he's going to pursue his goals, and he has a progressive outlook, but I think he's going to be open to ideas and open to talented people. And I don't think it's going to be the sort of kind of dystopic
Right.
vision that, Andrew Cuomo and the people who are trying to get him elected paint. So we'll see. But, I'd rather take a bet on a hopeful candidate than on a cynical one.
So you think hope and change can still
I'll tell you
win
what,
out?
man, I can't get rid of that bug. I still believe in it. I still
It's one of the
believe
best
that
bugs that we've had.
the core of democracy is our ability to use the tools that we're given. And this is why maintaining the democracy is important. Use the tools that are given to us to try and perfect our country and perfect our union. And when things aren't working, to chart corrective courses or other courses and explore other ideas. That's part of the genius of America. And it's what makes America, that's what's inspired the world. And, or one of the things. So, I still believe in that stuff. And what I saw when I went over to his headquarters were a lot of young people who did as well. And I thought that was a very encouraging thing.
Yeah. It would be nice if we could get back to those vibes, for sure.
Yeah.
David Axelrod, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome.
Jesse, pleasure to be with you. Invite me back.
Definitely.
Anytime Scott goes on another month-long vacation.
Yeah, or even with Scott. We could all hang. If you want.
Yes, or we should go, hang on whatever yacht he's sailing and
I don't even
maybe
know.
do one on the back deck.
Yeah, I think he's in Nantucket for a big chunk of it, but I'm not sure now. He always,
I see.
And he does. I still get tired and jet lagged and all the things, and the way that Scott bops around the world is a sight to behold.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
he's
amazing.
He is sui generis.
Last week, the S&P was on track for its worst November since 2008. Then NVIDIA's earnings came out. It calmed nerves for a moment. The entire market was lifted. The next day, however, the stock gave up all of its gains and the rest of the market followed. And then on Friday and yesterday, stocks rallied and the Nasdaq closed up nearly 3% for its best day since May. So we went down, then up, then down, then up again. A lot of mixed signals coming from the markets. So to help us make sense of all of this, we're speaking with Robert Armstrong, US commentator for the Financial Times, author of the Unhedged newsletter and fan favorite on Prof G Markets. Rob, thank you for joining us.
It's always fun to talk with you.
We want to get your reactions to just the up-down whipsawing that we keep seeing in the markets. Obviously, things look bad, and then NVIDIA reports earnings, and then things look good, and then the next day things look bad.
Yes.
And now apparently things are good again. What is going on? How do we make sense of this?
These are the kinds of days, as several of my readers have pointed out, that are designed to make market commentators like me look stupid. It's like, and the short, you don't want to spend too much of your energy predicting or analyzing short-term changes in the market. But I do think the volatility is telling you something here, which is it's a market in conflict with itself where strong fear is meeting with strong greed. The market is always a contest between those two emotions. But I feel like right now, both emotions are very strong. In other words, there is a strong sense, and you get this when you talk to people too, that if you're not in the market right now, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. And, there may be some truth to that. And we know that the market is expensive and there are some scary things going on we don't quite understand. So it's like, it's the push and pull between two opposing strong emotions, I think is the metaphor that probably captures it best.
What do you make of those two arguments? I mean, on both are pretty compelling to me, and that's probably why we're seeing such huge amounts of volatility. We had Aswath Damodaran, who I know you wrote about in your newsletter,
great interview.
Who was very bearish. Yep. But then at the same time, AI is transformative. NVIDIA had these great earnings. I have my gripes with that earnings report, but there's a lot of reason to be bullish as well.
Yeah.
I mean, where do you land?
Okay. So one thing that I've been writing about lately that is really important to keep in mind, when people are making bearish talk recently, including the great Damodaran, he's talking about extremely peaky valuations, that for every dollar of present earnings you're paying for the market, or even near-term earnings, you're paying a lot of money for each dollar of earnings, right? That's what we mean when we say markets are expensive. And the important thing for investors to keep in mind is that over the short term, like a year or 2 or 3 years, that is not predictive information. Like I've put scatter charts in my newsletter, right, where you have the PE ratio on one axis and the price return on the other axis, and it's just dots all over the place over 1 year. It's only after 5, 7, 10 years that the valuation, as some people say, investing is a game you win or lose on the first tee. In other words, if you tee off from a place where it's really expensive, you've kind of lost the game already. That is true, but it's true over 10 years, not over one. So what's going to happen next year? Valuation gives us no information. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you're thinking as a long-term investor, maybe it is a good time to shade back, like as Aswath said, a little more cash, maybe diversify a little more, be a little more careful. But it doesn't mean we're not going to have an absolutely ripping year in stock markets over the next 12 months. So switching feet, that's point number one. Point number two is I think the environment politically, and you and I don't know if we're going to agree or disagree here, but I think as a starting point, the environment politically is probably risk friendly, for the very unfair but nonetheless possibly true reason that this administration is going to pull every lever they can get their hands on until the midterms. Because I was talking to, a politics guy about this today. The betting is they lose the House, just as a starting proposition. They lose the Senate too. Trump just is sitting in a room alone for the next 2 years, right? Yeah. So whatever it takes in terms of a stimulus package, if things start to go sideways, either in markets or in the economy, we're going to see some stuff from this administration. Maybe it'll be a mistake. Maybe it's stimulus checks. Maybe it's inflationary, whatever. They're going to give it all a try. So
I think the important point there, and this was part of the bull case that you laid out for 2026, you called it fiscal largesse, interventionist White House. The point being, if the government spends money, history shows us over the short term that's good for the stock market.
Sure is. Absolutely good. If they spend, especially, and if they spend money, if they spend deficit money, in other words, if they borrow to spend, that's just cramming money into the economy. Because if they tax just as much, they're pulling the economy out. So the crucial thing is it's deficit spending. And we know already that some of that's coming. It was also pointed out to me today that the tax relief that is for companies and for households that is in the One Big Beautiful Bill is retrospective to this year, which means it's going to show up in people's refund checks in March and April. That's going to be money into the economy. Now, I probably share the fears you've expressed on this show that a lot of the action in the market in particular rotates around a few themes and a few stocks. I think that's probably a legitimate worry. Is that how you guys are feeling?
Yeah, I think that is our general concern, is that we're going to see the demand that seems to be artificially inflated. It will run out at some point. It sounds like what you're describing is that the government is going to have the ability and the incentive to keep kicking the can down the road, in which case maybe 2026, things will be good. AI continues to rip. But you did also lay out your bear case for 2026, where you bring out some of these issues. You got inflation, you've got NVIDIA stock cracks, margin contraction, Tanco, which was interesting. Just take us through the bear case.
Okay, so the bear case is, one, it becomes very politically hard for the president and his allies in Congress to do a lot of fiscal fiddling around, and a lot harder for the central bank to do monetary fiddling around if inflation comes back. I think inflation is the economic variable that I am always wrong about. And I'm even wronger than most people, which is very wrong. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you I can predict inflation. What I can tell you is the escape hatch of monetary and fiscal looseness for the market closes if we have inflation run past, say, 4. Then it becomes you're going to pump more money into the economy when we have 4% inflation. No, they're not, you're not going to get away with it. So then the wheels really come off. NVIDIA, look, company's worth $4.5 trillion, right? That's a mighty big boat. If it hits an iceberg, Tanco, the other one I mentioned, I think we've been lucky as people, as investors, that the president chickens out, in the taco line. Which will be written on my gravestone, whether I like it or not. But
yes, for those who are not aware, Robert Armstrong created the term taco.
Yeah, for Trump always chickens out.
That's right. And I think you filed for a patent as well, right?
Well, I asked about that, but you can't. As it turns out, you can't copyright a short phrase. So anyway, a short phrase. Anyway, very frustrating. Because Tanco just means there's always the worry that Armstrong is wrong about Trump. He's really a true believer, and he stops chickening out. In other words, if he gets into a real ideologically driven trade war with China rather than a posturing war, I don't like that much, right? So that's the stuff I'm worried about. I mean, it's really hard to say much of interest about what the stock market is going to do over a 1-year period. But these are the things, if I had to pick the things that could go right or wrong, these are the things that I would pick.
The other thing that's been really interesting watching over the past week has been what's happening to Bitcoin, which is just barreling down every day.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? What does that say about sentiment? I mean, we're really just trying to assess vibes here. That's all we can do right now. What does that say about the vibes?
There is an age line at which point, once you pass it, it becomes impossible for you to say something interesting about Bitcoin. And I am past that age. You are below that age. So I should be asking you what you think about this Bitcoin thing. Obviously, I mean, I can make the obvious point only, which is that it behaves like a highly speculative asset. All this stuff about how it's digital gold or it's a store of value or whatever. It just looks like it trades like NASDAQ after 10 drinks, basically.
Yes. Exactly.
I don't know I don't understand the thing well enough to say more about it than that.
Before we let you go here, is there anything that you're looking at right now that you think that we should be paying more attention to? I mean, I think it's very interesting what you're saying about inflation there. That scenario that you bring up where our backstop is federal spending or deficit spending from the government, which is only going to be even remotely acceptable if we don't have runaway inflation that gets up over 4%. It doesn't seem to indicate right now that we're not headed for that. We've been going up and up and up, 2.3 to 2.5. Yeah. Now we're up to 3.
Yeah.
Just after this conversation, I'm thinking about inflation.
I think the market's okay with 3. I think we have evidence before us that the market is okay with 3. So, but it's the direction of change, and you get up towards 4, and the politics of it are going to change a lot. What should we be watching? I mean, I think the thing I always watch is when companies do well and the stocks don't respond that much as was the case with NVIDIA, that tells you something. And I'm going to be watching for that pattern we saw with NVIDIA. Does it recur in the quarters to come? In other words, is absolutely everything priced in everywhere where companies are beating or meeting targets, or they're growing at the rate they've been growing and the market just doesn't care? And once that happens, it's like everybody, what that tells me, when that's the general pattern, is that everybody who can be in the market is in the market. And the only door that works is the exit door, because everybody is inside. So that's what I'll be watching.
All right. Robert Armstrong, commentator for the Financial Times, author of, you called it semi-retirement. So thank you for that as well. We really appreciate it. We need your insight.
Happy to be here.
So this jobs report, we added 119,000 jobs, which was good. But then we also saw that the unemployment rate went up to 4.4%. That's the highest unemployment rate we've seen in 4 years. Give us your reactions. Give us the breakdown. Was this good, bad, or something else?
Yeah, good, bad, or ugly. I think the way that I've tried to make sense of it is the labor market is cooling. It's slowing down. And every month we're going to make maybe 2 steps forward, 1 step back towards that cooling. So some months we add a lot of jobs, but then we'll see a heavy revision. Some months the unemployment rate stays stable. Other months like this one, we saw it jump to 4.4. You know, it's all kind of telling us the same thing, which is that we don't have a strong labor market right now. It's not robust. It's not expanding. It's not hot. We're just seeing it cool kind of at different paces according to different metrics. Maybe another way to think of it would be, you know, if you're driving a car, like the light's red. The cars are slowing down next to you at different rates, but we're all going to come to a stop. And it's not as if there's a green light ahead and everyone's just got their foot on the gas. So it's just at what rate things slow down and not if they're getting better.
That 4.4% number, which, I mean, when you look at it on a chart and you see it's this very, very high point compared to back in 2021, it was the last time it was that high. Is that significant, you think, that it's gone up, that it's the highest we've seen in 4 years? At least when I look at a chart and the line's as high as it is, it looks concerning to me.
Well, the pushback would be that, historically speaking, 4.4 is pretty low, and that there's a little bit of shouldn't you be grateful for a 4.4%? You know, back in my day, we lived at 5, right? There's this, you know, historical comparison of where the U.S. unemployment rate has lived over various points in history versus the kind of much more contemporary context of where we have been in the last 5 years. It's worth noting that when the unemployment rate was this high in October of 2021, it was falling. It was falling dramatically in each month as we were coming out of the pandemic. So think of this as around the fall after hot vax summer, when we all got our vaccines in 2021, this was the fall when like everything was reopening and stuff was coming back online. That's where we are in the unemployment rate now. And in the period since, the unemployment rate fell to a record low in the spring of 2023. It rose for about a year afterward. It's been stable for about a year, and now it's starting to increase steadily again. And the last 3 months have seen an uptick. Now, part of me has wondered if, because of the nature of the last 2 recessions, one being the pandemic and one being the financial crisis and associated recession, we're not used to a recession coming from a slow uptick in unemployment. We're used to the car crash, you know, the economy falling off of a cliff. But that's not how the U.S. typically enters a downturn. It just slowly marches its way there. So, yes, you could write off 4.4% as being historically low, but you know, 1980 doesn't matter to what's going on in the economy right now. The unemployment rate has been rising for 3 months.
Yeah. A lot of mixed signals in there. One thing that also stood out to me was the numbers in the manufacturing data. 6,000 jobs lost in manufacturing. That's the 3rd straight month of falling employment in manufacturing or rising unemployment, which is just ironic because this administration was going to bring back manufacturing. And I'm sorry to point it out, but that was the whole story that we were told. That was the pitch. And the opposite is happening. I mean, manufacturing is getting battered, it seems. Your reactions?
Tariffs are not an industrial policy. If you want to have revitalized manufacturing in the United States, you can't just put up a poster board in the Rose Garden and then clap yourself on the back and say, I did it. All right. It's, manufacturing in the 21st century economy, a global economy in which you have integrated supply chains, in which, as many of things we produce inside the United States are made with parts that are imported from outside the United States. It doesn't, it's not as easy as that. You have to have very thoughtful, very deliberate, and very well-designed industrial policy to revitalize manufacturing in the United States. And you've got to do it coordinated across workers, across employers, across, training schools for making those workers qualified for the job. And none of that happens when you just institute a tariff. And if you look through surveys of manufacturers, Texas has one, there's a national one, they'll tell you, here's what's going on in my business, here's what's going on in my company. And you've heard it, since that April 1st Liberation Day, they are plagued with uncertainty and rising input costs. And they can't expand and hire aggressively when they don't know what their bottom line will look like month to month. And some manufacturers will make out in this situation. You are going to have some manufacturers, some parts of the manufacturing base that are doing very well right now, and you'll have a lot that are outright suffering, and then the rest that are kind of muddying their way through a lot of uncertainty. And two of those scenarios do not lead to hiring.
The final piece that, a lot of investors like seeing these jobs numbers because it basically tells us something about what we'll see with the Fed's decision and the interest rate cut. Will we get a cut? Will we not get one? It appears we probably will. But we're also missing a ton of data. BLS, they canceled the October jobs report, also the October CPI report, the Consumer Price Index, which will tell us about inflation. We're not going to get the November CPI report until the Fed has already met. We also just learned that we're not getting the first estimate of GDP data. This government shutdown has basically meant that we're getting a giant shutdown in terms of lots of data, which means that the interest rate decision for the Fed, which investors are very interested in because it moves markets in a big way, it's not very clear what's going to happen there. I just want to get your reactions. What do you think is going to happen in terms of interest rates, and what do you think of the fact that we basically are operating with no data right now?
It's a deliberate choice. Our hands are not tied. The federal government could have had emergency operations include data collection at this time. They could have rescheduled data collection. They could have prioritized it and said this needs to come out before the Federal Reserve meets. They could have done all of those things, and they chose not to. So we are not here because of some, random act that has forced us into this position. We have chosen this path from the federal government, and this is where they want us to be. I think the Fed's decision, I would be surprised if they actually moved rates. With this much data uncertainty, I know that there are a lot of private data sources that have come up, but especially for the unemployment rate, the gold standard is the BLS, and nothing will compare, especially for those really small numbers. Like, what I thought was the most concerning part of the 4.4% unemployment rate this past month, data release back in September, was how much of it is comprised of the permanent layoff. It's not new people coming to the labor market. It's not people coming back to the labor market or people finishing up a temporary job. A quarter of the unemployed were laid off, meaning that they lost their job due to business conditions or their firm closed due to business conditions. That's a very high share for a non-recession time period. You will not have a private sector unemployment manufacturer give you anything like that type of detail. That's something only the BLS can provide, but is so important for understanding where our economy is. The administration has decided that they are not going to give us the data we need. I think there's a chance the Fed will react, but I would put my money on them not doing anything, because without knowing how it'll impact the economy, it's risky to move in either direction, so they'll hold still. This Fed in particular has shown that they like to err on the side of not moving too quickly. That's been used to condemn them. That's been used to praise them. But if that is their mode of behavior, I would be surprised if they did something in December.
Catherine Ann Edwards, host of The Optimist Economy, into it. It says nothing of the time and the energy and the attention that was wasted on Doge, starting from that original tweet that established Doge and got hundreds of millions of views and was retweeted hundreds of thousands of times, or even the thousands of memes about Doge that were strewn across every social media platform by Elon and by the president himself, and all of the general chaos, both online and in the real world, that was fomented because of this movement, which really disguised itself as some form of fiscal responsibility, but was in reality all about controversy and all about sticking it to this woke establishment. Few political movements in history have gotten more attention and had less impact than Doge. It sucked up all the energy in the room for many, many months, and yet here we are, it got us nowhere. And remember what Elon said about Doge. He said that Doge was going to save us $2 trillion. That is what he told us.
How much do you think we can rip out of this wasted $6.5 trillion Harris-Biden budget?
Well, I think we can do at least $2 trillion.
Yeah!
Yes.
$2 trillion.
At least $2 trillion. That's what he said. In just a few months, instead of that, we have actually added roughly $2 trillion to our national debt. And that doesn't even include the big, beautiful bill, which is going to add another $4 trillion to our national debt. So if we're evaluating his performance here, Elon's performance, I think it is fair to say that Elon Musk was the least effective political leader in modern history. Not only did he not accomplish his goal, he actually achieved the opposite. He increased our debt by the amount that he said he was going to cut. He increased government waste, and he pissed off millions of people on both sides while he did it. But now it's over. Doge is dead. That's the end of it. And it's a reminder of a larger flaw with this administration, and that is, like Doge, they are almost always all talk and no action. Whether it's these deals with nations that never actually materialize or government agencies that make a huge fuss and then quietly shut down, they're really good at making headlines that go viral and really bad at getting any of it done. And the result is actually worse, weirdly, than doing nothing. Because at least if you do nothing, then the people, we can just kind of go about our lives and find other things to worry about. But when you actively create drama, when you actively sow division, when you cause unrest through these performative acts of cruelty, all while getting nothing done, well, that is something different entirely. That's something much worse. And Doge was a great example of this. Now, to be clear, when history is written, when it's all said and done, Doge will be completely forgotten. It was an inconsequential agency that got nothing done. No one will recognize the name Doge. No one will know what it was. No one will remember it. But I will remember it. And I hope you do too. Because it's movements like Doge that slowly but surely ruin America. It's movements like Doge that we need to prevent. Movements that are void of substance, that are rooted in grievance, that are driven by some weird online need for attention, and that most importantly, do nothing for anyone. Doge is what it means to be inefficient. Doge is waste in its purest form. It is a blueprint for how not to run government. It might have lived a ceremonious life. It might have gotten a lot of attention in its day, but as with all bad leaders, it died an unceremonious death. It was quietly buried away in the annals of history, and it will be forgotten. But for those of us who care about America, who care about government, who care about the systems that run our
We're going to land in, I think it was Spokane, and you're going to give me $1 million because I have a bomb. And he had something that looked like a bomb, which later turned out not to be a bomb. And so they landed in Spokane or whatever. You can look all this up. I'm getting some of the details wrong. And they give him the $1 million. And he's like, okay, take the plane off again. And they're flying over the forest over there in Oregon. And what he has in his other bag is a parachute. And he takes his $1 million, puts on his parachute, and jumps out of the plane into the night on the 24th of November, 1974 or whatever. Never heard of again. So D.B. Cooper, as his name might be, is like the patron saint of people who are trying to get away with it. You know what I mean? And today is DB Cooper Day.
I kind of want that in the episode.
I mean, he probably died. He probably died.
I think we might have to. Let's do a real intro and then clap and choose.
You can just stick it on the end of the thing or whatever. Anyway, there's like songs about DB Cooper, and he's a folk. He's
I
a
love
folk
it because the
hero.
takeaway is so bad.
Yeah.
Terrible moral.
Terrible moral.
The worst fable of all time.
Yeah.
Okay. You got to give it a moment. This is what they teach you in comedy school. You got to wait a beat and wait for the audience.
Was that what they teach you in comedy school? You're talking to most comical at university, high school. So in bitch, the reason I was a virgin until 19 and not till 40 is because of this rocket sense of humor.
You can always improve. You can always be better, no matter how good you are.
Well, the Winter Olympics play an important social role. It's important that there's a sport or an event where only white people are allowed to play that sports that no one else can afford to learn. So
that's true. That's not a joke. That's just a fact.
Deep. That was social commentary in the form of humor. How are you, Ed?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm fucking exhausted. I'm doing this. I don't know if you've heard, but
you seem a little out of breath.
I kind of started a movement. And I'm about to go on Jake Tapper. And then, anyways, I unsubscribed. I know you want to know more about me. I unsubscribed from Uber last night. And by the way, I love Uber. This was a tough one. And when you unsubscribe, which I'm sure you've already done as you want to be part of this movement, and not just virtue signal all the fucking time, you little hipster Brooklyn sandal-dyed weirdo. But I unsubscribed from Uber, and the last screen you see, it tells you how many Uber Eats you've ordered and how many Uber rides you've taken. Okay, guess how many times I've ordered from Uber Eats?
I think it's got to be like 1,000. Am I going too high?
37. I'm not a big food delivery guy, and I usually use Caviar for some reason. I'm used to the interface. In the last 10 years, how many Ubers have I taken?
That's got to be over 1,000 for sure.
3,756. And I did some research. All right, so this is what big tech does. Big tech comes in with a value proposition where they charge you $20 for an Uber that costs them $40. They try and consolidate the market, and then they slowly but surely start raising prices. So I take Uber Lux. The average Uber Lux ride in 2015 was between $40 and $60. Today, by the way, Uber has raised its prices once they consolidated the market 7 to 10% a year, twice or treble times the rate of inflation. Now the average Uber Lux ride is $80 to $120. So 350 rides a year at an average price of about $100, because I'm usually going back and forth from the airport. I am spending every year $35,000 on Uber. That's true. And I realize this is a story of privilege, but what I've decided is I canceled.
Clip that now.
I canceled Uber. I've been taking the tube and the subway in New York, which are incredible. I don't know if you knew this, but there's tunnels underground and these cars go through them on tracks. And they get you where you need to go for like $2 or $3. They're seriously amazing. Some weird people, and also the people aren't that hot on the train. That's the only thing I would suggest fixing. We need more hot people on the trains.
Yeah, they could make a hot girls train, maybe. That would fix things.
Or hot dudes. I'm fine with the hot guys. I go to Equinox. At this point, I just want hot. So I figured out with the money I'm going to save, no joke, I could lease, including parking and insurance, with the money I'm going to save, having canceled my Uber account, I could lease a Mercedes G-Wagon, the new BMW i7, or a Range Rover with the money I'm saving. This is all a long-winded way of saying, go to Resist and Unsubscribe, and you will find out just how much money you are spending on different tech platforms that have slowly but surely increase their pricing, and you don't realize how much it's costing you. Anyways, I'm getting, just to really stick it to the man, I'm going to go buy a Range Rover.
But here's the question, because, how are you getting around? Are you switching to Lyft? Because I know you're doing this thing where you have two different subscriptions and you get rid of one of them. Is that what you're doing here?
I'm not exaggerating. I've been taking the tube and the subway, and I've been doing this awful thing called Uber X, where they have like air freshener and shitty cars and
wait, hold on.
God.
You're still taking Ubers, it's just you downgraded?
No, I do the Lyft, the cheap Lyft one.
Okay.
Lyft, it's called Lyft Walmart or something, or Lyft. Lyft, life has not worked out the way I'd hoped. And a guy who doesn't know how to use Waze and is on an Android phone. God, I sound like such a douchebag right now. But I've been taking the subway. It's incredible.
Good stuff. $35,000. That's pretty good.
So anyways, I'm going one by one. Uber was the tough one. I'm excited about that one. I'm doing Paramount Plus tonight. Tomorrow, I'm going to do Apple TV Plus. I did Amazon Prime on Friday. That wasn't hard. I don't order that much from Amazon. But anyways.
I'm shocked to hear that.
Yeah, I don't buy a lot from Amazon. What have you unsubscribed from, given I know that how emotionally invested you are in this movement?
I haven't unsubscribed yet, but I'm happy to hear from you what you think I should unsubscribe from. I could maybe go between Lyft and Uber.
Hold on one second, Ed. 1 second. Memo to file, Ed Elson, review and compensation. Does not act like an owner, is poor for morale. Music does not match the words. It's disappointing our audience.
We'll see how disappointed everyone is.
Let me get this. Your boss and a person you constantly say I'm your role model has started a movement and you have yet to unsubscribe from anything. Do I have that right?
You did get that right. Yeah.
And by the way, none of this comes for free. We just lost an advertiser who rhymes with Snapple. And I lost another telco advertiser that rhymes with Mint Mobile. Anyways, nothing's for free, Ed. Courage is like, it's really great you're finding your virtue all of a sudden, but we're not down with that. And so, yeah, nothing's for free. Nothing's for free. Anyways. All right, let's get to our guest, Ed.
All right, here's our conversation with Neera Tandon, President and CEO of the Center for American Progress. Neera, thank you for joining us on Prof G Markets.
Thanks for having me.
So I just want to start with a quick bio of who you are. So you are the CEO of the Center for American Progress. You've also worked in the White House. You're the director for the Domestic Policy Council under Biden. You also helped to create the Affordable Care Act under Obama. You are a Democrat, but you have just plainly had a lot of experience in policy. So we want to focus on affordability in this episode and the policies that we're seeing from the administration so far. But just based on your experience, having worked in the White House, having worked as a policy maker, how would you rate the performance of this administration 1 year in?
I think the first and foremost thing for any administration to do is to figure out how to do no harm. In that arena, the administration has definitely failed. What is, kind of stark is that at a time where people are concerned about really making ends meet, the administration's cornerstone policy is tariffs.